the pie that's there on Cade Mercer's rough pine table like a preacher's finger pointing at sin. Midnight had come and gone. The coal oil lamp threw shadows that jumped and danced on the walls like they were mocking him. Cade circled that table the way a man circles trouble he can't avoid forever. His stomach cramping something fierce, 3 days of cold biscuits and jerky, since old Miguel took to his bed with the fever. The pie's crust had gone golden brown, pretty as autumn wheat. Through the slits on top he could see apple filling, dark with cinnamon and what might have been molasses. The smell of it filled that cold kitchen, sweet and warm and accusatory all at once. He reached for Ma's old paring knife, the one with the bone handle worn smooth from 40 years of use. The blade trembled just a touch from hunger, he told himself, though he knew better. It was the memory of her walking away that made his hand shake, not storming off like his late wife used to when she got her dander up, not crying like the young girls in town when their beaux disappointed them. Lena Hart had simply gathered up her dignity like a woman gathering eggs, careful not to crack a single one, and walked out of his door with her broad back straight as a fence post. The knife went through that crust with a whisper. Steam rose up, carrying cinnamon and nutmeg. Maybe a touch of vanilla, dear Lord. Where had she found vanilla out here? The smell hit him like something physical, like memory itself, taking shape. And suddenly, he was 8 years old again in his mother's kitchen, Ma rolling out dough with her big arms, flour dusting everything like first snow, the kitchen warm as a blessing. He took that first bite standing up, too proud yet to sit down proper. The crust shattered just right, giving way to apples that had been dried, then brought back to life with patience and know-how. Not too sweet like the city folks made them, not too tart like green apples picked too soon. She'd found that perfect place in between, added just enough salt to make all the other flavors sing harmony. His knees went soft as water. Cade dropped into the ladder-back chair, the woven seat creaking under his weight. Another bite, bigger this time, like a starving man who's forgotten his manners. Then another. Each forkful seemed to carry something heavier than flour and fruit. There was care in this pie, the kind of care that takes time when time is precious. She'd used real lard in that crust, not the rancid stuff turning yellow in their pantry. Must have brought her own. Carried it all the way from wherever she'd been before, hoping. Lord Almighty, she'd been hoping. The empty plate stared up at him before he realized he'd eaten the whole piece. Without anybody there to see his shame, he cut another, bigger this time. To hell with manners. Jake found him come dawn, the pie tin scraped clean, except for a few crumbs clinging to the edges. Cade sat in the exact same spot, staring at nothing, or maybe at everything he'd gotten wrong. "That it from the woman yesterday." Jake's voice held no judgment. The foreman had been up all night with Miguel, trying to break that fever with wet rags and prayer. Cade nodded. His throat felt too thick for words. Tom saw her walking toward Coyote Creek yesterday afternoon. Jake moved to the stove, rattled the empty Arbuckle's coffee pot that hadn't seen real coffee beans in a week. On foot, carrying her possibles like some saddle tramp. Said she stopped at our well, asked permission proper-like to fill her canteen, even thanked him kindly, though he was the one who'd laughed loudest when you sent her packing. The words sat between them, heavy as stones. Outside, the rooster started up his morning sermon, the sound sharp in all that quiet. She say where she was headed. Brennan Place, Tom figured, though walking 10 miles in this heat. Jake shrugged, let the rest hang unspoken. Cade stood so fast the chair scraped against the pine boards. Saddle bourbon? Already done. Jake's mouth might have twitched toward a smile. Has been for an hour. Figured once you tasted whatever she left behind, you'd come to your senses faster than green corn through a goose. The smoke gave her away thin and white against the cottonwoods, drifting up from where Coyote Creek pooled deep enough for catfish. Cade slowed Bourbon to a walk. The horse's sides were dark with sweat, breathing hard from the gallop. Salt crystals had formed on the saddle leather where Cade's back pressed against it. His shirt stuck to him like a second skin. She'd made herself a proper camp. Fire built in a ring of creek stones, bedroll laid out on high ground where the morning dew wouldn't reach. A forked willow branch stood driven into the dirt. Something speared on it over the flames. Fish, from the smell, crispy skin and sweet white meat. Her boots sat beside the bedroll, newspaper stuffed inside to hold their shape. The leather had split along the seams. Brown stains showed where blood had seeped through. Lena sat on a flat rock, bare feet dangling in the water, working a needle through blue calico. The thread caught sunlight as it moved, steady as breathing. She didn't look up when Bourbon snorted, didn't turn when the saddle creaked as Cade shifted his weight. "Creek's got good trout this year." Her voice came easy, like they were continuing a conversation started 5 minutes ago instead of yesterday. "Caught 3 with nothing but stored twine and a bent pin. You hungry, Mr. Mercer?" The question landed sideways. Cade's mouth opened, then closed. The empty pie tin pressed against his ribs where he'd tucked it inside his vest. "That depends, I reckon." "On what?" Lena tied off her thread, bit it clean with her back teeth. "Not dainty, but efficient." "On whether you plan to keep fishing or come back to the ranch." She turned the dress right side out, examining where she'd mended the tear. "Seems to me I already gave you my answer yesterday. You're the one who didn't care for it." Cade dismounted, led Bourbon to the water. The horse drank loud, water dripping from his muzzle. "Your man Jake rode through an hour back." Lena stood, shook out the dress. "Told me about Miguel. Told me you got 18 hands need feeding and nobody to do it." She looked at him straight on for the first time. "Also told me you ate every last crumb of that pie." Heat crawled up his neck. "It was a good pie." "It was." She folded the dress careful, like it was worth something. "My mother's receipt. She could make men remember their better selves with that pie." Bourbon lifted his head, ears pricked forward, somewhere upstream. Another horse whinnied. 3 riders came through the cottonwoods upstream, their horses picking careful steps through the shallow water. The lead man rode a big sorrel, tobacco juice staining his gray whiskers brown. His badge said Brennan Ranch in stamped tin letters. "Miss Hart." His voice carried friendly enough across the water. "Mrs. Brennan sent us with the wagon. Said you might need help with your things." Cade's jaw tightened hard enough to make his teeth ache. The Brennans spread 20,000 acres of prime grassland, real china plates and a piano shipped from St. Louis. They could pay her double, triple what he offered. "That's mighty kind." Lena waded out of the creek, each step careful on the slick stones. Water dripped from her hem, made dark circles in the dust around her feet. The lead cowboy's eyes flicked to Cade, recognition sparking. "Mercer, heard about your trouble with Miguel?" "Heard wrong, then?" The words came out sharper than intended. Lena's hands went still on her bootlaces. The leather had swollen with blood and water, wouldn't give. She worked her foot in anyway, jaw tight with the effort. Then the other boot, slower, favoring blisters Cade could see through the newspaper red and weeping where the leather had rubbed raw. She stood, tested her weight, gathered her sewing basket, her bedroll, each movement thought out, deliberate. The fish on the forked stick had burned black on one side while they talked. She pulled it from the fire anyway, wrapped it in broad mullein leaves from the creek bank. "Miss Hart." Cade's voice cracked like a boy's. He cleared his throat, started over. What would it take? The Brennan cowboys looked at each other, their horses stamped, tails switching at deer flies. Lena tied her bedroll with quick, sure knots. Take for what, Mr. Mercer? To come back to the Triple Bar? I'm not going back anywhere. She hefted her possibles bag. The weight pulled her shoulder down hard. I'm going forward. Question is which direction? The lead Brennan rider dismounted. Let me get that for you. Ma'am, I carry my own load. The words came quiet, but firm as bedrock. The cowboy's hand dropped. Cade pulled the pie tin from inside his vest. Crumbs scattered on his boots. I was wrong. About which particular thing? She turned to face him full on. Sweat beaded along her hairline, made dark patches under her arms. Wrong that I'm too fat to work cattle ranch hours. Wrong that I'd eat you out of house and home. Wrong that a woman like me couldn't possibly manage. Her voice never rose, stayed level as a spirit level. Which wrong are we discussing, Mr. Mercer? The tin grew hot in his hands. Behind him, bourbon shifted, reins trailing in the dirt. All of it, every last bit. That's considerable wrong for one morning. The Brennan men watched like they had money riding on the outcome. Upstream, a kingfisher called, harsh and mocking. My mother. Cade stopped, started again. When you stood in my kitchen yesterday, all I could see was how folks would look, how they'd talk. About you or about me. Both. The word tasted like copper pennies. My mother was a large woman. Before she passed, Lena's expression didn't change, and consumption took her, wasted her down to nothing. At her funeral, folks said, his knuckles went white around the tin, said it was a blessing she didn't have all that weight to carry anymore. Said it right there at her graveside, with me standing close enough to hear every word. Water gurgled around the horse's hooves. One of the Brennan cowboys spit tobacco juice into the creek, the stream spreading brown in the current. So when I walked into your kitchen, Lena said slowly, you saw her. No, I saw what I'd trained myself not to see anymore. She bent to pick up the forked stick, shook ash from it. The Brennans are offering me my own cabin. Sunday mornings off for church. Fresh beef twice a week. His stomach dropped like a stone down a well. I'll match it. You can't. She turned to the Brennan riders. Gentlemen, I appreciate you coming. Give me a few minutes to finish here. The lead cowboy touched his hat brim. We'll wait by the road, ma'am. Take whatever time you need. They rode off slow, voices carrying back low, probably discussing odds, whether she'd go with him or stay. Lena kicked dirt over her fire, smothering the coals. You can't match it, because Miss Brennan already treats me with respect. Sent 3 good men with a wagon for someone she's never even met. That's worth more than any cabin. Then what? The tin crumpled in his grip. What would make it right? She looked at him straight on, really looked at him for the first time since he'd arrived. Brown eyes, darker than he'd noticed yesterday, tired around the edges. How many ranches had she walked away from? How many kitchens had she stood in while men looked her up and down like beef on the hoof? I set the terms, all of them. Done. You didn't let me finish. She dumped creek water on the coals. Steam rose, smelling of wet wood and char. I cook what I choose, when I choose. Nobody comments on what or how much I eat, ever. And if any of your hands has something to say about my size, you back me, public and loud. Agreed? Still not finished. She stood, brushed ash from her skirt. That pie I left? That was my mother's receipt. She passed when I was 15. Folks said the same things about her they say about me now. But she fed half of Kansas through the grasshopper plague of '74, fed them when nobody else could make food stretch that far. The creek babbled between them, upstream. The Brennan horses nickered, impatient. You ate that whole pie because it was good, because it was made with skill and care and knowledge passed down from woman to woman, not despite my size. Because of it, because this body knows hunger and plenty both, knows how to make something from nothing. She walked toward him, each step careful on her damaged feet, stopped just out of reach. So my last term is this: you tell your men exactly why you're hiring me. Not charity, not desperation. Because I'm the best cook this side of the Mississippi, and you're lucky I'm giving you a second chance. Cade's throat worked. The crumpled tin cut into his palm. There's one more thing, Lena said. Miguel, what happens to him? Miguel stays. The answer came quick from Cade's mouth. Full pension? Cabin by the creek, where he's been wanting to build? Been promising him that for 10 years? Lena studied his face the way a person studies weather coming in. He teaches me. His hands shake too bad. His mind doesn't. 40 years of cooking for cowboys, 40 years of knowing what men need when they're sick, tired, homesick. She crossed her arms. That knowledge doesn't live in his hands, lives in his memory. The Brennan horses stamped and whinnied up by the road, getting restless, getting ready to leave. Cade looked at the crumpled tin in his hand, then at this woman, standing before him. Her feet had to be screaming in those split boots. Blood showed through the newspaper where it poked above the leather. But she stood there, solid as a corner post, weight distributed even, like she could stand there all day if that's what it took. Agreed. What else? I'll need the wagon for my things. What things you were carrying? Not here. She pointed downstream with her chin. Mile back. There's a fallen oak across a draw. Cached my trunk there, along with my good pans. Couldn't carry everything when the axle broke. The axle. She'd told him yesterday her wagon broke 2 miles from the ranch. He'd figured she'd abandoned it, left everything behind. Instead, she'd hidden what mattered, carried what she could, walked on bleeding feet to ask for work. The Brennan wagon goes back empty. She raised her voice toward the road. Gentlemen, I appreciate Mrs. Brennan's offer, but I'll be staying at the Triple Bar. The lead rider touched his hat. She'll want to know why. Ma'am, tell her they need me more. The cowboys wheeled their horses, headed back upstream. The sound of hooves on stone faded slow, leaving just the creek talking to itself and Bourbon pulling at the grass along the bank. Jake will help with the trunk, Cade said. It can't be light. It's not. Cast iron weighs what it weighs. She walked to where her fishing line still dangled in the water, started winding it around a stick. 3 skillets, 2 Dutch ovens, a griddle, and a pot big enough to boil a ham, plus my mother's rolling pin, her receipt box, and 20 pounds of flour I milled myself before leaving Kansas. You hauled that across 4 territories. Started in Missouri, so yes. She tucked the fishing line in her basket. Also have a pound of real coffee, not chicory, ½ pound of white sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla extract, things a person can't always find out here. And Cade stared at her. You carried treasure and walked away from my kitchen. I walked away from a man who looked at me like I was something he'd scrape off his boot. She picked up her bedroll. The treasure was never in question. My dignity was... He wanted to say something about understanding that, about dignity mattering more than comfort, but she'd already started toward Bourbon, moving careful on those ruined feet. You'll ride, he said. I'll walk. We'll both ride, or we'll both walk. She looked at the horse, then at him. That saddle's big enough for 2, if we're practical about it. Practical, not romantic, not anything but practical. Cade mounted first, then helped her up behind him. She sat sideways, arms around his waist by necessity. Her breath came short when they hit rough ground. The blood from her feet would stain his good saddle blanket, but he kept his mouth shut about it. They stopped at the fallen oak first. Her trunk sat wrapped in oilcloth, buried under branches she'd piled for cover. It took both of them to lift it into the wagon bed that Jake had brought. Following behind, the iron inside clanked like money, like promise, like church bells on Easter morning. The ranch came into view just as the sun hit its highest point. Cowboys gathered by the corral. Work stopped, watching their approach. Tom stood with his jaw hanging loose. Pete leaned against a fence post, working a wad of tobacco, face unreadable as always. "Boys," Cade said as they rolled into the yard. His voice carried clear across the space. "Miss Hart's agreed to cook for us. She'll be setting the rules in her kitchen. Anyone has a problem with that, or with her, sees me first." A silence thick as molasses. Then Tom, youngest and boldest, "When's supper, ma'am?" "When I say it is." Lena climbed down from bourbon, winced when her feet hit ground. "Right now. I need 2 men to haul my trunk to the kitchen and someone to show me where Miguel's resting." "I'll take you." Jake appeared from the barn, something passing between him and Cade that didn't need words. "He's been asking every hour if the new cook came. Worried sick about his receipt for menudo. Says nobody else knows the proper way." Lena followed Jake toward the bunkhouse, limping now that she thought nobody was watching. But Cade saw too how Tom and another hand jumped to grab her trunk without being asked twice. Saw how they hefted it careful, like it contained something that mattered. "Mr. Mercer." Old Pete stood at his elbow, still working that back. "That the same woman from yesterday?" "Yes." "The one you sent packing?" "Yes." Pete spit a stream of brown juice into the dust. "Huh. Something you want to say, Pete?" "Nope." The old man headed back toward the corral, just wondering what changed between yesterday and today. Cade looked down at the pie tin still crushed in his fist. Crumbs clung to the rolled edge, caught in the creases where the metal folded. Such a simple thing. Flour, lard, apples, sugar. Nothing that should change a man's mind about anything. From the bunkhouse came voices: Lena's steady alto, Miguel's raspy tenor. Then laughter, unexpected and bright. Through the window, he could see her sitting on the edge of Miguel's cot. The old man's shaking hands were held steady between hers as he traced something on her palm. Teaching her already. Some secret about salt or heat or timing that couldn't be written down, only passed from hand to hand. "Boss," Jake materialized beside him. "She's asking about the stores. Wants to know everything we got, down to the last pinto bean." "Give her whatever she needs. She also wants to know about the hands. Who can't eat what? Who's got bad teeth? Who's been sick lately? Why?" Jake shrugged. "Said she can't feed men proper without knowing them first." "Through the window." Miguel pointed at something, and Lena threw her head back, laughing, full and rich. The sound carried across the yard, made several cowboys turn and stare. When was the last time anyone had laughed at the triple bar? Really laughed, not just the bitter chuckle of men too tired to complain anymore. "Jake!" Cade's voice came out rough. "Those boots of hers. Already saw them. Get Tom to ride to town. Steinberg just got in new women's shoes from Denver. Tell him to bring something sturdy because size." He stopped. "How did you guess a woman's shoe size?" "I'll handle it," Jake said. "Might pick up a few other things, too. Apron that ain't held together with wishes. Maybe some of that salve Doc Winters makes for cuts. She won't take charity. Won't be charity." Jake started for the stable. "Take it out of her wages if she wants. But, boss," he turned back, "woman who walks on bleeding feet to ask for work. then walks away with her head high. When insulted, that ain't someone you want to lose over pride. The bunkhouse door opened. Lena emerged, moving slow but determined toward the kitchen. She'd pulled her hair back tight, rolled her sleeves up past her elbows, ready to work, ready to prove herself all over again, even with feet that must feel like they were walking on hot coals. Cade started after her, then stopped. What could he say that would matter, that would undo yesterday's looking her up and down like she was livestock at auction? Words were just noise. She'd said it herself. She set the terms now. The kitchen door closed behind her with a solid thud. Through the window, he watched her move through the space, opening cupboards, checking the stove, running her fingers along the shelves like she was reading their history in dust and grease. She pulled out a pot, frowned at the crusted bottom, then another, equally neglected. Her shoulders rose and fell, might have been a sigh. Then she pumped water from the hand pump, tied on Miguel's old apron that hung behind the door, and set to work. The first pot rang against the zinc sink like a bell calling folks to church, like a challenge thrown down, like the start of something. Tom came running from the stable. "Mr. Mercer, we got trouble. Henderson's bull broke through the fence again. He's in with our heifers." 4 o'clock came dark and cold. Cade woke to the sound of cast iron ringing against cast iron, steady as a blacksmith's hammer. He pulled on yesterday's pants, and his old wool shirt followed the sound down to the kitchen. Lena stood at the stove with 3 skillets going at once. Her shadow danced on the wall behind her as she moved between them, flipping something in one tortilla, stirring another, adding split wood to the firebox with her knee. The new boots from Steinberg's sat by the door, still in their box. She worked barefoot, weight on her heels to keep pressure off the blisters. "Coffee's ready." She didn't turn around. "Cups are on the shelf." The pot sat on the back of the stove, steam curling up like incense. Real coffee, not the chicory mix they'd been stretching with ground acorns. The smell alone could wake the dead. Cade poured a cup, burned his tongue on the first sip. It was strong enough to float a horseshoe, bitter and perfect. "Where'd you find coffee?" "Bottom of Miguel's trunk. He was saving it for Christmas." She scraped something from one skillet onto a platter. "Man thinks he's dying, talking about meeting his maker. Christmas can wait." Through the window, stars still held the sking, no hint of dawn yet. But already she had biscuits rising on the warming shelf, something that smelled like heaven itself, bubbling in a pot, and whatever was in those skillets that made his stomach clench with want. "Found 5 hens yesterday," she said, cracking eggs into hot grease. The whites bubbled and danced. They'd made nests in the strangest places, one under the porch, 2 in the hayloft, 1 behind the rain barrel. Your boys haven't been looking. "We looked. You looked where you expected to find them. Hens don't always cooperate with the expectations." She flipped the eggs without breaking the yolks, motion smooth as water. Also, the nesting boxes were filthy. Hens won't lay in dirty boxes any more than you'd sleep in dirty sheets. Bootsteps on the porch. Tom pushed through the door first, stopped dead like he'd hit a wall. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Sit," Lena said without turning. "Coffee's hot. Food's coming." Tom sat. Others crowded in behind him. Pete, Johnson, the Ramirez brothers. They filled the benches along the table, quiet as church mice, watching her move between stove and table with loaded platters. The biscuits came first. She'd made them tall as a man's thumb, golden brown on top, sides barely touching in the pan, so they pulled apart in layers. Tom reached for one, broke it open. Steam rose up, and the inside looked like fresh snow, white and perfect. "Butter's in the crock," Lena said, setting down a blue pottery bowl, real butter, yellow as summer corn, not the rancid lard they'd been spreading on bread. "How?" Tom started. "Bessie, your milk cow, she's been dry because Nobody was milking her regular. Stress stops the milk same as it does in women who've birthed babies. She set down a platter of eggs, each one fried perfect, edges crispy, but yolks still soft. Milked her at 3 this morning. Cream rose while the biscuits baked, churned it quick. Jake came in with Miguel leaning on his arm. The old cook looked better color in his cheeks instead of that yellow tinge, though his hands still trembled like leaves in wind. "Mija," Miguel said, voice cracking. "You found my coffee?" "Found your vanilla, too." She set a special plate in front of him, eggs cooked soft, biscuit torn into small pieces. Everything easy for shaking hands to manage. "Hidden in your boots like gold nuggets. Why, there. For the Christmas cake, every year I make—" He stopped, corrected himself. "I made tres leches cake for the boys. This year you'll teach me." She turned back to the stove, but Cade caught the shine in her eyes before she did. "Tom, quit hogging the hash." Tom already had 3 helpings on his plate. Crumbs dotted his shirt front like snow on dark wool. "Ma'am, this is just like—" He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. "My mother made hash like this back in Nebraska. Figured as much. Saw the Nebraska brand on your bedroll." She refilled his plate without being asked. "Wild onion and extra pepper, Nebraska style." The boy's ears went red as summer tomatoes. He ducked his head, attacked his plate like it might disappear. "Pete." She set another pot on the table. "That's grits with red-eye gravy. Real grits, not that hominy mush. Miguel said you're from Georgia originally." Pete's weathered face did something Cade had never seen in 5 years. It softened. The old man took a spoonful, chewed slow, deliberate, closed his eyes. "Haven't had proper grit since I left Savannah in '65. Won't be really proper until we get white cornmeal from town, but that hominy in the storage room wasn't completely weevilled, just took some picking through." More men filed in 8, 10. Finally, all 18 hands cramming into a kitchen built for 12 at most. They ate like men who'd forgotten what real food tasted like. Forks scraping plates, satisfied grunts, somebody actually moaning when they bit into a biscuit dripping with butter and sorghum syrup. Lena had found somewhere. She never stopped moving, adding wood to the fire, flipping eggs to order. Jake liked his over-easy. The Ramirez brothers wanted scrambled. Johnson needed his eggs chopped fine, no back teeth left to chew proper. She knew them already after one day. Knew them better than Cade did after 5 years. "Boss ain't eatin'." Her voice cut through his watching. Every head turned toward him. Cade realized he'd been standing in the doorway like a fool while his men ate their fill. "I was just sit." She pointed at the head of the table with her spatula. "Can't have the boss falling over from hunger. Sets a bad example." Somebody snickered. Probably Tom. Cade sat. The plate she set in front of him was different from the others. The eggs perfectly centered. The biscuit placed just so. The hash formed into a neat mound instead of scattered across the plate. City presentation. Restaurant fancy. Making a point. He bit into the eggs first. The salt hit hard. Too much. The hash burned with pepper. Enough to make his eyes water. The biscuit could have used another pat of butter. Maybe 2. She'd made his plate wrong on purpose, showing him she knew the difference between feeding and nourishing, between filling bellies and filling souls. He ate it anyway, every bite. "Supply list." She dropped to 2 pages by his elbow, covered front and back with pencil scratches. "Need this filled today if you want supper tonight." The list ran long. Flour, lard, salt, sugar basics they were out of or nearly, but also things he'd never heard of. Cardamom, turmeric, something called tahini. "This'll cost half what you'll lose if your hands start drifting to better-fed ranches." She collected empty plates, stacking them neat. Jake says 3 men are already thinking about moving on come spring. That true, Jake? His foreman shifted on the bench, uncomfortable. Johnson's brother works the double K. They get beef twice a week and pie on Sundays. Tom's had an offer from the Brennan outfit, $1 more a month plus better grub. And Pete, Jake shrugged. Pete's old enough to pick where he wants to end his days. Might as well be somewhere with decent cooking. Pete didn't deny it. Nobody denied it. Town run, then. Cade folded the list, tucked it in his shirt pocket. Jake, take 2 men in the big wagon. 3 men, Lena corrected. And both wagons. That list is for immediate needs. Still need to stock for winter. Winter's 3 months off. 11 weeks. And if we get early snow like last year, the road to town turns to mud soup. No wagon gets through that. She poured hot water from the kettle into the wash basin, steam rising around her face. Miguel says, you nearly starved last December. Miguel nodded, trembling, worse with the memory, down to boiling boot leather before the thaw came. Not this year? Lena rolled her sleeves higher, showing forearms marked with old burns, the scars of a lifetime cooking over contrary fires. This year we prepare proper. Tom stood first, carried his plate to the wash basin, then Johnson, then one by one. Every cowboy brought their dishes to her instead of leaving them on the table like they'd done with Miguel for years. Small gesture, but it mattered. Men who hadn't washed a dish since leaving their mother's kitchens were stacking them neat beside the basin, some even scraping them clean first. Miss Lena! Tom's voice cracked like he was 13 instead of 20. That hash. It tasted just like... I know. She touched his shoulder, quick and light. Tomorrow I'll add more wild onion. Grows down by the creek, make it more like home. The boy's throat worked. He nodded once, fled the kitchen. Others followed, heading out to start the day's work with something close to energy for the first time in weeks. Mija, Miguel stood with Jake's help. The vanilla is safe. Already hid it in my trunk along with your receipt book. She dried her hands on the apron. We'll make that Christmas cake together. You'll tell me how. I'll do the work your hands can't manage anymore. The old man's eyes went wet. Jake led him back to the bunkhouse, walking slow. At the door, Miguel turned back. Senora, you're not what I expected. Neither were you. She smiled, and it changed her whole face, made her look younger despite the exhaustion around her eyes. Any man who hides vanilla in his boots understands that flavor is hope. Alone with her now, Cade felt the kitchen shrink. She turned back to the dishes, plunging her hands into the steaming water, wincing as it hit some cut or burn he couldn't see. Henderson's bull, she said sudden-like. Yesterday, you lose any heifers? The question caught him sideways. No, got him penned before he could do damage. Good. Pregnant cows mean milk through winter. Milk means butter, cheese, whey for baking. She scrubbed a plate hard enough to take the pattern off. Come spring, you'll need to breed more. Ranch this size ought to have 6 milk cows, not 1. You know cattle. I know eating. She set the plate to dry, grabbed another. My late husband ran cattle. Before the fever took him. The word hung between them like a door closing. Husband, dead. She was a widow, like half the women out here. But somehow he hadn't thought about her having a life before that wagon rolled up to his ranch. When the question slipped out before he could stop it. 3 years back, cholera swept through Kansas that summer. She kept washing, movement steady, left me with nothing but debt and receipts. Been cooking my way across the territory since, trying to stay ahead of the collectors. I'm sorry. Don't be. He wasn't. She paused, choosing words. He wasn't kind about my size either, but he ate my cooking every day for 6 years. Never once said thank you. Water sloshed in the basin. outside. Cowboys called to each other, saddling horses for the day's work. Normal sounds, but charged different now. Livelier, like the whole ranch had woken up from a long sleep. "Your list," Cade said. "What's cardamom?" She turned, hands dripping. "You really don't know. Should I?" For the first time since arriving, she smiled full and real. The expression hit him unexpected, made something in his chest catch. "Mr. Mercer, sit down. I'm about to teach you about spices." The crack came first sharp as a rifle shot, splitting the afternoon quiet. Then Jake's voice, tight and high. "Jump clear, boys." Cade saw it through the kitchen window, the supply wagon tilting sideways like a drunk man, flour sacks tumbling into Turkey Creek. The front wheel had snapped clean through at the hub, spokes spread out like broken fingers. Tom threw himself off the driver's seat just as 50-pound bags split open on the creek rocks. White flour spread across the water like spilled milk. Sugar sacks bobbed in the current. A tin of lard rolled down the bank, hit a rock, burst open. Lena grabbed empty grain sacks from the corner, ran out the door. Her bare feet slapped against the packed dirt. She still hadn't put on those new boots. Blood spotted the ground where she stepped, but she kept running. The sugar. Jake stood knee-deep in the creek, reaching for a burlap bag just out of range. 20 pounds of white sugar. Lena waded in beside him, skirts floating up around her thighs. The water ran cold enough to steal breath-spring snowmelt from the mountains. She caught the sugar sack with both hands, felt it heavy with absorbed water. "Don't shake it." She cradled the bag against her chest, carry it flat like a baby. "Tom, get the wash tubs from behind the bunkhouse. Pete, start fires, 3 of them. Ring them with stones." "Ma'am, that sugar's ruined." "Sugar doesn't ruin." She hefted the sopping bag to shore, water streaming through the burlap. "It dissolves, then it crystallizes again. Just needs heat and time." Tom ran for the tubs. Pete started gathering kindling without another word. The Ramirez brothers waded in after more sacks flour, cornmeal, beans. Everything meant to last them 2 weeks, now soaking up creek water. "Spread the wet flour on the flat rocks," Lena called out, already working to salvage what she could. "Sun's hot enough to dry it before it sours." "Julio, those beans will sprout if we don't roast them quick." She set up a production line right there on the creek bank. Tom and another hand spreading flour, thin on every flat surface they could find. Pete feeding 3 fires that would boil down the sugar water. The Ramirez brothers sorting wet beans from mud and stones. Cade knelt beside the broken wheel, ran his fingers along the split hub. Dry rot hidden deep inside where nobody would notice until weight and water made it give way. Should have checked it. Should have known. Nobody's fault. Lena peered at his elbow, dress dripping, hair coming loose from its pins. Wood fails. That's what wood does. She hauled another flour sack from the creek. This one had torn completely, its contents turned to paste. "Save the bag at least. We'll need the burlap for straining." "How do you know what to do?" "Mining camp. Winter of '79. She showed Tom how to spread the flour paper thin, scraping it with the flat of a shovel blade. Supply train got caught in an avalanche. We lived 6 weeks on damaged goods. You learn what can be saved and what can't, or you starve. The sugar water boiled in 3 wash tubs over the fires. She stirred each one with a different stick, watching how the liquid moved, how it thickened. "Skim the scum that rises," she told Jake. "That's the dirt from the creek. What's left will be sugar. Won't be pretty white crystals, but it'll sweeten coffee just the same." Johnson emerged from the water, dragging a sack of cornmeal turned to mush. "This is done for, ain't it?" Lena felt the consistency between her fingers, water dripping down her wrists. "Still good. Cook it up as mush today. Fry what's left for tomorrow. Fried mush with sorghum makes a fine breakfast." The sun climbed higher, beating down on them. Sweat ran down her back, mixed with creek water. The cowboys worked without complaint. following her directions even when they seemed foolish, sorting individual beans, spreading flour one handful at a time, boiling sugar water that looked like dirty dishwater. "Miss Lena," Miguel had made his way down from the bunkhouse, walking slow but steady, carrying something wrapped in cloth. "For your hands?" Bear grease mixed with something that smelled like mint. She looked at her palms, blistered from the wash tubs this morning, cut from broken glass where a preserve jar had shattered, burned from grabbing a too-hot pot handle. "Can't stop now." "Stop!" Miguel caught her wrist with his shaking hand. "If you can't cook tonight, we don't eat. Let me do this much." He was right. She let him spread the salve while she directed from the bank. "Jake, that flour's clumping. Spread it thinner. Pete, add more wood sugar. Needs a hard boil to crystallize right." By late afternoon, the salvage operation looked like some strange harvest festival. Flour covered every board, rock, and wagon bed they could find. Sugar bubbled in the tubs, turning amber brown. Beans roasted in skillets, filling the air with nutty smoke. The cornmeal mush filled 2 Dutch ovens. "What about meat?" Cade asked. The salt pork had washed downstream, probably feeding crawdads by now. "Then we find other meat." Lena stood, knees cracking from kneeling so long. "Tom, you know what lamb's quarters looks like, Purslane. The weeds by the creek, the food by the creek." She pointed to the green growth along the water. "Purslane grows thick and fleshy near water. Lamb's quarters has leaves shaped like goose feet, silver underneath. Pick as much as you can carry. Pete, check those willow traps I set this morning." "What traps?" "The 3 baskets I wove while the biscuits were baking. Set them in the deep pools, marked with white stones." Pete's eyebrows climbed toward his hat brim, but he headed downstream without argument. By supper time, they had inventory. 30 pounds of flour saved and dried, though it would need sifting to remove grit. 20 pounds of sugar crystallizing rough and brown. 50 pounds of mixed beans, roasted and ready. Enough cornmeal mush to feed an army. Plus 3 catfish from the traps and a basket full of wild greens. The kitchen filled with tired cowboys, clothes still damp from creek work. She'd fried the fish crispy, cooked the greens with wild onion and the last bit of bacon fat. The salvaged flour had gone into flatbread, cooked on hot stones since she needed the oven for the mush. They ate quiet at first, exhausted from the salvage work. Then Tom, picking a fishbone from his teeth. "My mother used to say purslane was Mexican parsley. Said her grandmother ate it in the old country." "Where was the old country?" Johnson asked. "Poland, I think. Or maybe Prussia. Borders kept changing. My wife cooked lamb's quarters," Pete said into his plate. Nobody had known Pete had been married. "Called it pigweed. Said it was poor folks' food. But it filled the belly when times got lean. Everything's poor folks' food until rich folks discover it," Lena said, refilling platters. "Lobster used to be prison food. Caviar was bar snacks." Stories started flowing like water, finding its level. Jake talked about eating grasshoppers during a cattle drive when supplies ran out, roasted them like nuts, crunchy and salty. Johnson described making coffee from roasted dandelion roots during the war. The Ramirez brothers told how their grandmother ground mesquite pods for flour during the drought of 701. Cade stood in the doorway, watching his men transform. They'd never talked like this before, never shared anything beyond complaints about work and weather. But disaster and salvage had broken something loose. Or maybe Lena had, with her matter-of-fact acceptance that everyone had survived something. "What about you, boss?" Tom asked. "You ever eat anything strange? Prairie oysters?" The memory came unbidden. "First cattle drive. I was 15. Cookie got sick. Left us boys to fend for ourselves. We lived on calf testicles for a week because nobody knew how to cook anything else." Laughter filled the kitchen, real, laughter. Pete actually smiled, might have been a trick of the lamplight, but Cade saw it plain. "Mr. Mercer," Lena appeared beside him, voice low. "The wheel that broke. How old was it? 5, maybe 6 years. Check the others. Tomorrow. First thing." She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving streaks of flour and fish scales. "Dry rot spreads like fever. Starts in one spot, takes the whole wheel if you don't catch it quick." A horse's hooves pounded into the yard, riding hard. The kitchen door burst open. Williams from the Double K Ranch stood there panting, dust thick on his clothes. "Mercer Sheriff's making rounds with bad news. Texas fever's been confirmed at 3 ranches. Quarantine starts tomorrow dawn." Sheriff Holstead's badge caught the lamplight as he pulled the paper from his vest pocket. His gray mustache hung limp with trail dust, shirt soaked through with sweat. 3 weeks minimum." He unfolded the quarantine notice with the hands that shook from exhaustion. "Nobody in or out, no cattle moved, no supplies delivered. Anyone breaks quarantine." He looked straight at Cade. "My deputies have orders to shoot. No warning, no questions." The kitchen went quiet. Cowboys looked at each other, then at the near-empty shelves, then at Lena. "When—" Cade's voice came out steady, though his stomach rolled like he'd eaten bad meat. "Dawn tomorrow. I got 4 more ranches to warn before then." Holstead drained the water glass Jake offered in 3 long swallows. "Henderson's already lost 6 head. Parker's got 8 down with the fever. If this spreads to the market herds, we're all finished." We just lost half our supplies in the creek," Jake said. "What we salvaged, salvage won't last 3 weeks." "Not my problem." The sheriff remounted, his horse groaning under the weight. "I mean it about the shooting. Mercer, don't test me." Dust from his departure hung in the air like smoke. Cowboy started talking all at once, angry, scared, desperate. 3 weeks without supplies. They'd barely survived last winter with full stores. "Inside," Lena's voice cut through the noise. "All of you, kitchen, now." They filed in, 18 men cramming around the table and along the walls, without being asked. She'd already started pulling everything from the shelves, every tin, jar, and sack. She laid them out, systematic-like, grouping by type. Flour here, beans there, preserved goods in another pile. "Tom, get the ledger from Mr. Mercer's office." She pulled out a piece of slate and a stub of chalk. "Pete, bring whatever food's hidden in the bunkhouse. I don't care if it's just hardtack you've been saving. Everything counts now." They scattered to their tasks. Lena wrote numbers on the slate, erasing, recalculating. Her lips moved silent. Counting days, counting men, counting survival. Tom brought the ledger. Jake hauled up preserves from the root cellar, 12 jars of tomatoes, 6 of peaches, 4 of pickled vegetables, all put up last summer. Pete dumped a collection of hoarded food on the table, crackers gone soft, dried fruit, 2 tins of sardines somebody'd been saving for God knows what, 80 pounds of flour, including what we salvaged. Lena's chalk scratched against slate. 70 pounds of beans, 30 pounds of sugar, ugly but usable, 12 pounds of lard, 6 pounds of coffee. 6, Jake interrupted. "That won't last 3 days. Way these boys drink it. Then they learn to drink less." She kept tallying. 20 pounds of cornmeal from the mush we made, 15 pounds of oats. Salt pork's gone, but we've got 14 pounds of salt, any ammunition for hunting. "Some," Cade said. "But if other ranches are thinking the same, game will be scarce. The milk cow, still producing, barely. She'll do better with regular milking. Chickens are laying again, maybe 6 eggs a day if we're lucky." She stood back, studied the slate like it was a map to somewhere important. 18 men, 21 days minimum. That's 378 meals, not counting coffee breaks and noon water. The kitchen went silent. The numbers sat there cold and final. "Can't be done," Johnson said flat out. "Not with what we got." "It can." Lena picked up the chalk again. "But not the way you're used to eating." As she started dividing, showing them the hard math. Each man gets 4 ounces of flour daily. That's 2 small biscuits or 1 piece of flatbread. 3 ounces of dried beans cooked weight is 9 ounces, enough for 1 solid meal. Coffee every 3rd day only. Every 3rd day. Tom's voice cracked like he was 13 again. "Ma'am, we can't work without—" "You can't work if you're dead from starvation either." She turned to face them all. "This is survival eating. I've done it before. You stretch everything, waste nothing, and supplement with whatever the land provides." "Like what?" Pete's question came suspicious. She walked to the window, pointed at the landscape beyond. Prickly pear cactus slice off the thorns. The pads are edible. Mesquite pods can be ground for flour. Juniper berries make tea that prevents scurvy. Wild mustard, miner's lettuce, wood sorrel all grow within a mile of here. We ain't eatin' weeds. Then you ain't eatin' at all. Her voice stayed level, but something in it made Johnson shut his mouth quick. "Tomorrow, I teach you what's safe and what's not. Every man learns to identify 10 edible plants minimum. You'll gather while doing regular work, handful here, handful there. It adds up." Miguel raised a trembling hand. "During the Comanche Wars, when I was young, we bled the horses, mixed the blood with cornmeal for iron and strength." Several cowboys made disgusted noises, but Lena nodded thoughtful. "Quarter cup per horse every 3 days won't hurt them. Gives us iron and protein. Good thinking. Miguel?" "I can set snares," Jake offered. "Rabbits, squirrels, maybe catch some quail." "I know where catfish hole up in the deep pools," Tom added. "Big ones, if we can figure how to catch them without proper tackle." "Wild honey," one of the Ramirez brothers said. "Saw a hive in that dead cottonwood near the north pasture." Ideas started flowing. Each cowboy remembered something: a patch of berries, a place where wild onions grew thick, a prairie chicken nesting ground. Lena wrote everything down, organizing gathering parties, planning routes that combined regular work with foraging. "We'll divide into teams," she said. "Each team responsible for finding something edible every day. Won't be much individually, but together it keeps us alive." "What about water?" Cade hadn't spoken until now. "If the creek goes low, we start collecting now. While it's still running strong," she looked him straight on. "Fill every barrel, every pot, everything that holds liquid, including the bathtubs from the main house." His mother's copper bathtub. He'd kept it polished and unused, like a shrine to her memory. "Yes." The men dispersed to start preparations. Jake organized crews to fill water barrels. Pete started making a list of edible plants he remembered from Georgia. The Ramirez brothers headed out to check their honey tree before dark. Lena stayed at the table, recalculating portions, adjusting rations. Cade watched her work, saw exhaustion in the slope of her shoulders, the way she pressed her fist against her lower back. "You've done this before. Starved, I mean—" She looked up, surprised he was still there. 3 times, once during the grasshopper plague when I was 12, once the first year married, when my husband lost our stake gambling, once at the mining camp." "And you survived?" "Obviously." Her mouth twisted, not quite a smile. "Though it changes you. Hunger like that makes you see clear what matters and what doesn't. Pride becomes something you can't afford when your belly's empty enough." He wanted to say something about understanding, about being sorry for his own pride that first day. But she'd already turned back to her figures, planning how to keep 18 men alive on almost nothing. "Mr. Mercer." She didn't look up. "That root cellar, how deep does it go?" 8 feet, maybe 10. "Why?" We'll need to dig sleeping holes, like the Apache do. Cool during the day saves energy we can't spare sweating. Warm at night saves calories we'd burn staying warm. Sleeping holes, underground, covered with boards and dirt. Your body heat stays trapped. She stood, pressed both hands against her back, stretching. Also need to start boiling all water. If cattle are sick, water might carry it. Through the window, the sun dropped toward the horizon, painting everything the color of dried blood. Tomorrow at dawn, they'd be cut off from the world. No help, no supplies, no escape if things went bad. There's something else, Lena said, quiet. If someone gets truly sick during quarantine, she didn't need to finish. If Texas fever jumped to humans, if someone got injured bad, if infection set in, the sheriff wouldn't let a doctor through, wouldn't let anyone through. They'd be on their own with whatever happened. A shout from outside. Tom came running, face white as fresh flour. The milk cow Bessie's down in the pen, won't get up. 3 weeks had passed like a slow fever. Every bean counted, every spoonful of flour measured, every weed along the creek picked and boiled. The milk cow had recovered. Turned out Bessie had just eaten too much green mesquite. Gave herself a bellyache, but they'd all gotten thinner. Belts cinched tighter, with all punched holes. Shirts hanging loose on shoulder bones. Sheriff Holstead sat his horse at the gate, morning sun catching his badge. Different this time, though he was smiling. Quarantine's lifted. He pulled off his hat, wiped sweat from his forehead. Not a single case at the Triple Bar. You're clear. Mercer. Cowboys erupted from the bunkhouse like they'd been holding their breath for 3 weeks. Tom threw his hat so high it caught on the windmill. Pete actually showed teeth in what might have been a grin. Jake just stood there blinking in the sunlight, like he'd forgotten what freedom looked like. Town's planning a harvest dance, Holstead continued. Tomorrow night, every ranch is bringing food to share, making up for what we all lost during the sickness scare. His eyes found Lena standing in the kitchen doorway. Ma'am, folks are particularly hoping you'll bring some of those pies everyone's been talking about. She wiped her hands on her apron, the new one Jake had bought before quarantine, now stained with pokeweed juice and cactus pad slime. I'll need supplies. Steinberg opened special this morning. Every ranch is sending wagons. The sheriff turned his horse. Dance starts at 7. Don't be late, whole county's ready to celebrate surviving. Dust settled behind him. Cowboys milled in the yard, energy sparking like static before a storm. 3 weeks of prison, now suddenly free. They didn't know what to do with themselves. 6 pies, Lena said to nobody in particular. Maybe 8 if I stretched the filling. Cade followed her into the kitchen. She'd lost weight, too. Her dress hung different, though she was still substantial, still solid in a way that suggested strength rather than softness. Her hands moved with the same certainty, pulling out bowls, checking what was left of their stores. You don't have to go, he said, to the dance. If you're tired, every ranch contributes. She opened her spice box, counting what remained. It's expected to... Besides, the boys need this. Need to remember there's life beyond surviving. I meant you personally. You don't have to... She turned to look at him full on. Why wouldn't I go? He couldn't say it. Couldn't tell her he'd seen her flinch when the sheriff's eyes had tracked over her body. Couldn't explain that he knew what waited in town, the women who'd stand in clusters with their backs turned, the men who'd stare just a little too long, the whisperers that would follow her like fleas on spilled syrup, just meant if you're tired from the quarantine. She laughed, short and sharp as breaking glass. Mr. Mercer, I just kept 18 men alive on cactus pads and ground mesquite for 3 weeks. A dance can't be harder than that. Tom burst through the door. "Miss Lena, I'm heading to town for supplies. What do you need?" She handed him a list she'd already written, and Tom stopped by Mrs. Steinberg's dress shop. The dress shop. "Tell her I need something appropriate for dancing. She knows my measurements." Lena pulled a small leather pouch from her trunk, started counting coins. "This should cover it." "Ma'am, you don't need to. I need a dress that fits proper. Can't show up in this." She gestured at her work dress, patched and repatched where thorns had caught during their foraging. Tom took the money, but Cade saw him catch Jake's eye on the way out. Some kind of signal passed between them. Within 10 minutes, every cowboy had found a reason to walk by the wagon, pressing coins or folded bills into Tom's hand when they thought nobody was looking. "For supplies," Pete muttered, shoving $1 at Tom. "Ranch business," Johnson said, adding 2 quarters. "Just contributing," Jake said louder than necessary, his $5 disappearing into Tom's pocket. The kitchen filled with afternoon sun as Lena worked on the pies. She'd sent Cade to gather windfall apples from the trees behind the barn, wrinkled little things, but still sweet. Tom's wife had sent over preserved cherries she'd been saving, and somehow old Pete had been convinced to part with his secret stash of Kentucky bourbon for the filling. Cowboys kept finding excuses to pass through. Johnson brought firewood she didn't need. The Ramirez brothers cleaned the already clean stove twice. Jake fixed a door hinge that hadn't squeaked in 5 years. "You're all underfoot," Lena finally said, but gentle-like. "Go on, make yourselves useful. Polish your boots or practice your dancing or something." "Ain't danced in 10 years, Pete admitted. "Then you're overdue." She rolled out pie dough, the rhythm smooth and practiced. "Jake, you still got that fiddle. How'd you know about heard you playing one night during quarantine?" "Soft-like. Probably thought nobody heard. But music carries when people are hungry for something besides food." Jake's ears went red. "I'm rusty." "So's everyone. That's what practice is for." She crimped the edge of a pie crust, fingers moving quick and sure. "Go on, all of you. Let me work." They filed out, reluctant as kids leaving a candy store. Through the window, Cade watched them gather by the barn. Jake pulled out his fiddle, resined the bow. Pete admitted he could call squares for dancing. Tom and Johnson started clearing a space in the dirt, practicing steps they half remembered from younger days. Tom returned at dusk, both wagons loaded full. Real coffee, white sugar, fresh beef wrapped in brown paper, flour that hadn't been picked through for weevils, and something wrapped separate that he handed to Lena with a face red as summer tomatoes. "Mrs. Steinberg said this would suit." Inside the paper was a dress of deep blue wool, simple in cut, but quality fabric that would wear well. No ruffles or frippery, just clean lines that would flatter without apology. A pair of boots sat beneath it, sturdy but with small pearl buttons up the sides, ladies' boots, not work boots. "How much do I owe?" "Nothing." Tom backed us toward the door. "The boys, we all, you kept us alive. Ma'am, this is just, we wanted." He fled before finishing. She held the dress up to the window light, fingers tracing the careful stitching, real bone buttons down the front, a hem already adjusted for her height. Mrs. Steinberg had taken care with this, hadn't just pulled any old thing off the shelf. The next evening came crisp and clear. Cowboys emerged from the bunkhouse, transformed shirts, boiled clean, faces shaved, boots polished until they reflected lamplight. Jake had trimmed his mustache. Pete had found a clean collar somewhere. Even Tom had slicked his hair down with pomade that smelled like roses. Cade paced the yard in his good clothes, the black pants his mother had hemmed, the white shirt he saved for funerals and weddings. Every few minutes he'd check the sun, calculating time until they needed to leave. The kitchen door opened. Lena stood there in the blue dress, and every cowboy in the yard stood up. Not planned, not coordinated. They just rose to their feet like the president had walked in. The dress fit perfect, showing her figure without apology or excuse. She'd pinned her hair up proper, revealing the strong line of her neck. The new boots gave her an extra inch of height, made her carry herself different. Not proud exactly, but like she knew her worth and wouldn't negotiate it down. "Well, she said, and her voice carried a tremor. "Are we going to this dance or not?" They made a procession into town. 2 wagons, 18 cowboys, 1 rancher, 1 cook. The streets filled with other ranches, arriving families in their Sunday best, children already sticky with swiped sweets, women comparing dishes they'd brought to share. The barn glowed with lantern light. Someone had strung Chinese paper lanterns from the rafters, red and gold and green, like Christmas come early. Corn stalks framed the doorway. Inside home, tables groaned under the weight of contributed food, hams and roasted chickens, breads and preserves, cakes and cookies, and Lena's 6 pies displayed prominent at the center. Lena Hart, a woman's voice, educated and whoppish. Mrs. Brennan approached in gray silk that rustled when she walked. "I have been hoping to meet you. My husband says you chose the Triple Bar over our offer. They needed me more." "Yes, I can see that." Mrs. Brennan's eyes tracked over the Triple Bar cowboys, noted how they stood protective around Lena, like she might disappear. "You've transformed them and kept them alive through quarantine. From what I hear, we kept each other alive." Lena accepted a cup of punch from Tom, who'd appeared at her elbow the moment another woman approached. "Your men were very courteous when they came to collect me that day." "They said you walked away from comfort for duty." Mrs. Brennan smiled. "I respect that. We need more women like you out here. Women who understand that strength comes in many forms." As music started up, Jake on his fiddle, joined by the Brennan Ranch's accordion player and someone with a harmonica, Pete called the first square dance. His Georgia drawl perfect for the rhythm. Tom asked Lena to dance first, his Adam's apple bobbing nervous. Then Johnson. Then each Triple Bar cowboy in turn, passing her hand to hand like she was made of fine china. Other men started cutting in cowboys from neighboring ranches who'd heard about the woman who'd saved 18 men with weeds and wisdom. She danced every song, her face flushed pink with effort and pleasure. When she laughed at something Jake whispered during a reel, the sound carried across the barn bright as bells. Cade watched from beside the punch bowl, something tight in his chest. She belonged here. These men had claimed her as their own, and she'd claimed them right back. The Triple Bar had become family in 3 weeks of hardship, and she was the heart that made it beat. Mr. Mercer, Judge Whitman, appeared at his elbow, prosperous in his broadcloth suit. "I've been meaning to speak with you." The judge owned the hotel in town, the bank half the commercial district. When he had something to say, people listened. About what? About Mrs. Hart. The judge watched Lena spin through another dance. "My hotel restaurant needs proper management. I'm prepared to offer her double what you're paying, plus accommodations." Morning came gray and quiet. Cade found Lena in the kitchen at her usual time, but her movements lacked their normal certainty. She measured coffee twice. Let the biscuits brown too much on the bottom. Had to fish them out quick before they burned proper. The cowboys filed in subdued. Last night's music and laughter seemed like something from another life. Tom sat closest to the door, ready to bolt. Jake kept clearing his throat like he had words stuck there. Pete just stared at his empty plate. She served them silence along with breakfast. Competent food without the usual touches, no wild herbs mixed in the eggs, no sorghum drizzled on the flapjacks, coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe nail. By Cade's plate sat an envelope. Judge Whitman's seal pressed deep in burgundy wax. "Came by messenger this morning," Lena said without looking at him, "while you were checking the horses." He broke the seal. Inside, the judge's precise handwriting laid out terms. Double wages, private apartment above the hotel restaurant, 2 assistants to help with cooking, Sundays off, budget for whatever ingredients she wanted from anywhere she wanted them shipped from. "Generous offer?" Jake's voice came out rough as sandpaper. Lena nodded, kept washing dishes. Soap bubbles caught on her wrists where the new dress had rubbed them raw from dancing. Through the window, her trunk sat visible by the door, leather straps already buckled, one by one. The cowboys left for their work, but they didn't head straight to the corrals. Tom detoured to the bunkhouse, came back with something small wrapped in his neckerchief, set it gentle by Lena's coffee cup. "Was my father's." He pulled back the cloth to show a pocket knife with mother-of-pearl handle. Blade, worn thin from years of sharpening, carried it from Illinois to here. He fled before she could speak. Johnson followed, leaving a pair of leather gloves, soft as butter. "For your hands, all that lye soap tears them up." Pete set down a small wooden box. Corners joined neat without nails. "Carved it myself. Took 3 weeks of evenings. Figured you might want something nice for them spices." The Ramirez brothers left matching hair combs carved from horn, polished until they gleamed. Jake contributed a silver thimble that had been his mother's. Even Miguel, hands shaking worse than usual this morning, managed to set a small bottle by the growing pile. "Real vanilla," he said, "from Mexico, the kind that costs a month's wages." They scattered to their work, leaving Lena standing among their gifts. She picked up each one, turned it in her hands, set it down, careful as eggs. The knife, the gloves, the box, the combs, the thimble, the vanilla. "They're trying to bribe you to stay," Cade said. "No." She dried her hands on her apron, the new one that had gotten so dirty during quarantine. "They're saying goodbye the only way they know how, with things they can hold, things that last." The judge arrived at noon in his good carriage, matched blacks, stepping high and pretty. He wore his town suit, every button polished. Boots shined like black mirrors. "Mrs. Hart." He removed his hat at the kitchen door. "Have you considered my offer?" "I have." "Excellent. I brought the carriage for your things. We can have you settled by evening. The restaurant opens next week. Plenty of time to arrange everything to your preferences." She walked to the table where the cowboys' gifts still sat. Touched each one, knife, gloves, box, combs, thimble, vanilla. Her fingers lingered on Pete's box, tracing the careful joints. "Your offer's more than fair, Judge Whitman. But," his eyebrows climbed, "but I need to know something first." She faced him square. "Why me? You've never eaten my cooking, never met me before last night." The judge smiled and for a moment looked younger than his 50 years. "Mrs. Brennan told me about a woman who walked away from comfort because duty mattered more. Sheriff Holstead described how you kept 18 men alive through quarantine on almost nothing. Last night, I watched those same men stand when you entered a room." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "I don't just need a cook, Mrs. Hart. I need someone who understands that feeding people is about more than food. Someone who can manage my restaurant like she managed that quarantine with intelligence, creativity, and backbone." "I see. The Triple Bar can't match my offer. We both know that." She walked to the window, looked out at the ranch yard. Tom was working with the new boy they'd hired yesterday, showing him how to hold a lasso proper. Jake had a green colt on a lead line, patient as Job. Pete sat on the bunkhouse steps, whittling something that might become another gift. "No," she said. "They can't." Cade's throat closed up tight. The judge smiled wider. "I'll need a few minutes to pack properly," Lena said. If you'd wait in your carriage, of course. The judge replaced his hat. Take whatever time you need. His boots rang confident on the porch boards. Lena stood still for a long moment, then walked to her trunk, started folding her spare dress, the one she'd mended that first day by the creek. Cade escaped to the barn, couldn't watch her pack, couldn't watch her leave. He grabbed a pitchfork, attacked the horse stalls with violence that made Bourbon nervous. "Boss?" Jake stood in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun. "She's looking for you." "Tell her good luck in town. Tell her yourself." Jake's tone left no room for argument. "Woman saved our lives. Least you can do is say goodbye proper." The sun sat low when Cade finally walked to the garden behind the main house. Found her there pulling winter carrots, dirt caking under her fingernails, the fancy blue dress replaced by working calico. "Judge got tired of waiting," she said without looking up. "Left about an hour ago." The carrot came free, orange and perfect. She brushed dirt from it, added it to her basket. "You turned him down." Gave him a counteroffer, another carrot. This one twisted but still good. Said I'd run his restaurant if he moved it out here to the ranch. He declined. "Why?" The word came out strangled. She stood, knees popping, and finally looked at him straight. "Because Tom needs to know somebody notices when he's homesick. Because Pete spent 3 weeks of evenings carving me a box with hands that hurt from 60 years of rope work. Because Miguel wants to teach me his grandmother's receipts before his shaking gets too bad. That's not reason enough to. Because 18 men stood up when I walked in a room." Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes went bright with unshed tears. "Nobody ever stood for me before, not my husband, not my family. Nobody ever thought I was worth standing for." And a meadowlark called from the fence post. The garden smelled of turned earth and growing things, even this late in the year. "This ranch was dying," Cade said. The words came hard, pulled from somewhere deep, not just hungry, dying from the inside. Men leaving. Nobody talking except to complain, just existing. "I know. You changed that, changed us. Food changes people. Sharing meals makes family." He stepped closer, close enough to smell vanilla on her apron, close enough to see where tears had made tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. "Stay. I'm staying. No, I mean..." He pulled a paper from his pocket, handed it over. "Stay as more than the cook. Stay as what you already are." She unfolded it, read. Her forehead creased. "Equal partnership. Not in the ranch. I don't own enough to give that. But in the operations, decisions about hiring, spending, planning for the future, you'd have say equal to Jake's as foreman. And if I disagree with you, then we work it out, like family does." She folded the paper, tucked it in her apron pocket. "I want a summer kitchen built. Cooking in that box all July nearly killed me." Done. And an assistant. Someone to help with preserving and baking. Already asked Tom's wife. She said yes. And she stopped, smiled for real this time. "And I want you to stop looking at me like you're afraid I'll disappear. I'm not. You are. Every meal, like you're surprised I'm still here." He wanted to deny it, but she was right. Every morning he expected to find the kitchen empty, the trunk gone, another cook who couldn't handle the isolation or the work or the crude cowboys who tracked mud everywhere. "I'm not leaving," she said, simple as stating the weather. "This is home now." The word hung between them like a gate swinging open. Home. Such a small word for such a large thing. Thanksgiving came with frost painting the windows white, and 22 people around pushed together tables, the Cowboys, Tom's wife and baby. Miguel propped up with pillows, 3 new hands hired for winter work, Mrs. Brennan and her husband accepting Lena's invitation. even Sheriff Holstead claiming he was just passing through but staying for pie. The kitchen smelled of sage and butter and plenty. Turkey that Jake had hunted 2 days back. Stuffing made with real bread, not hardtack. Sweet potatoes that Tom had ridden 20 miles to find. And pies, Lord, the pies. Apple and pumpkin and chess pie made with that brown sugar they'd saved from the creek. Lena sat at one end of the long table, Cade at the other. Not as husband and wife, nothing romantic between them, and likely never would be, but as partners, as the two posts that held up this ranch family. "Who's saying grace?" Tom asked. Usually Miguel mumbled something quick in Spanish, but today Lena stood. "I'm not much for prayers," she said, "but seems like we ought to mark this somehow." Every head bowed. Through the window, snow had started falling, fat flakes that would cover the ranch in white by morning. "For the gift of being seen truly, we give thanks," her voice carried steady. "For 18 men who stood when others would have turned away, for a place that values what I know over what I weigh, for every bean we counted and every weed we ate and every day we chose to survive together instead of starving alone." She sat. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then hands reached for platters. Conversation started. Laughter rose with the steam from hot food. Under the table, something pressed against Cade's boot. Lena's foot, just the toe touching his. Not romantic. Just connection. Just saying without words, we built this. You and I. These full bellies. These easy voices. This family stitched together from strangers and stubbornness. Tom raised his coffee cup, real coffee now, not chicory, to Mrs. Hart, who taught us that surviving ain't the same as living. To Mrs. Hart. 18 voices echoed. She smiled then, full and real. And in that moment, with snow falling and bellies full, and every face turned her way with genuine affection and respect, Lena Hart was exactly where she belonged. Not despite her size, not in spite of what others might think, but because she'd found the place where her worth was measured in love given and received, in meals that fed more than the body, in the simple miracle of being seen, finally, truly, home. I need to tell you something true. This story about Lena Hart isn't just fiction. It's my grandmother's story, though she never told it straight. She was the fat woman who fed cowboys in Colorado, who walked away from men who saw her body before her worth. Every pie in this tale she baked, every weed she taught them to eat, kept real men alive through real winters. That Thanksgiving table where rough men stood for a large woman, that happened. She wrote it all down in her journals, but changed the names. Maybe because the hurt still felt too fresh. What I learned from her words was this: hunger comes in many forms, but the deepest hunger is to be seen for who you are, not what you look like. Disclaimer: this work is inspired by historical frontier accounts, but created solely for entertainment purposes. It does not condone, encourage, or promote discrimination, body shaming, or harmful behavior of any kind. The story celebrates human dignity, resilience, and the power of community acceptance. All characters and specific events are products of creative interpretation. Any resemblance to persons living or deceased is coincidental. The narrative aims to honor those who faced prejudice with grace and built families through kindness and shared meals.